Welcome back to this latest episode of Japan's top business interviews. I'm your host, Dr. Greg Story, President, Dale Carnegie Tokyo Training. My special guest today is Kasper Mejlvang, who is the president of Novo Nordisk Japan. Kasper, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us on the show.
Thanks for having me.
You have a very famous company, and particularly some of the new drugs that you've introduced around obesity control, etc. So the name is very famous. Just for people who may not know the company, just give us a very brief explanation of what your company does.
Yeah, thank you very much, and well done on the pronunciation of my name, by the way, because that's something that most people find difficult outside Denmark. I'm happy that you say that our company is well known today because for the past 20 years, every time I've tried to introduce our company, people would go, Novartis, and then I had to explain that Novo Nordisk is a slightly different type of thing. But you're right that we are a pharmaceutical company. We have been around for more than 100 years. We started our business in diabetes. We were actually founded by two physicians who one of whom won a Nobel Prize in physiology, animal physiology, and he won a global lecture tour to the US at the time when his wife, who was also a physician, got diagnosed with diabetes. And at that time, you would die from being diagnosed from diabetes. She put herself on a starvation diet to survive as long as possible. And then she convinced her husband to take a detour to Toronto, University of Toronto, where it so happened that at the time they found insulin to be, a treatment for diabetes. And so they were allowed to take the patent back to Scandinavia and commercialized insulin. And that was the starting point for our company. So we've been around for 100 years, very focused on diabetes until some decades ago. We've been differentiating ourselves into some other rare blood disorders, rare endocrine disorders, but diabetes has been the main business. And then 25 years ago, we started going into obesity because that's, the research is very linked and the disease understanding is very linked in the whole cardiometabolic space to obesity. A lot of people are getting type 2 diabetes, after having had obesity disease for many years. So it was a natural place to venture into, and that has really accelerated our company over the past years. We started to launch products into the obesity space, and it became known in the main street some years ago, particularly in the US. Well,
there's a whole raft of flow-on effects, aren't there? I mean, obesity impacts the health industry. If people don't get so obese, they tend not to get other illnesses. It affects the food processing industry because they're producing highly fatty or carbonated drinks or whatever. So the market for that tends to drop off, and it sort of bounces right through the whole food chain, doesn't it? In a good way.
Yeah.
In a good way, which is preferable. I mean, I come from Australia, which used to be, I thought, pretty good, but I notice that young people are getting quite chubby. Yeah. If you look back at photographs of Australia, 70s, 80s, when I was growing up, everyone looks pretty slim. Looks pretty healthy or sporty. Yeah. But you start to see the changes now. You're not looking after themselves as well, not exercising as much. So having things like this to try and ease some of that pressure on the medical industry, and also clean up some areas in the food industry which are probably not helpful, is probably a good thing.
I think there's today more than 1 billion people living with obesity disease. There are more people dying from obesity than there are people dying from starvation in the world. So it's really a problem, a global problem that needs to be tackled. And I think too many people still in the public think of obesity as something which is a simple matter of willpower, that you need to eat less and exercise more, while in fact there are so many genetic factors, biological factors playing into who gets obesity, who doesn't get obesity, that makes it very unfair to put it on the individual. individually to fight the whole food processing industries, our cultural norms, socioeconomic factors. And once you get obesity disease, your body will fight from an evolutionary perspective against losing weight. So it's almost an impossible battle. So you need to help people with more holistic interventions to get into a normal weight range where it again becomes possible to then live a healthy lifestyle that makes it possible to maintain a healthy weight for the rest of your life. So I think that's
I see it
one
now,
big battle.
You know, we're in April, and I see it. People who turn up in the gym in January with their personal trainer who are way too much meat on them, and then they've gone. Now they've disappeared. So somewhere along the line, the willpower or the lifestyle change or the education or something's not working for them. So they have maybe an alternative now can try and at least get the body reduced and then try and work on that. But anyway, how about yourself though? Let's hear a little bit about you. Give us a bit of a background on your career and then bring us up to date to how is it you're running Japan? How did you get to here? So what have you been doing in your career so far?
So I have been with Novo Nordisk for 23 years. Novo Nordisk is a global company. We are 77,000 people around the globe today. We are headquartered in Denmark. So I entered the company in Denmark 23 years ago. I have a very different background to many others in my position. I'm originally a psychologist by training. I also took a management degree in the UK. Also later took an executive MBA from IMD in Switzerland. But my starting point was as a psychologist getting into our HR headquarter function, but very quickly I became an HR business partner for one of our manufacturing areas, and one of the SVPs, senior vice presidents for our manufacturing, tried to get me into the line of business. So I quickly changed into a line of business role, and I went on for around 12 years in different manufacturing roles. I was heading up API, active pharmaceutical ingredient sites in Denmark. I also took 5 years in France, heading up our fill finish manufacturing site there.
So just to interrupt there, I guess I'm guessing that in most companies who are manufacturers, going from an HR position, even though if you're business partner, to president of anything is probably very remote. I've met I have met a couple, very, very few people who go from HR into the presidency. So probably that movement across into the manufacturing line is probably a springboard to moving up to being able to take on a senior position, I guess. Would that be the case?
Yeah, I think you're right that many people in HR or other supporting functions seldom also don't necessarily want to take the responsibility in a line of business function where in the beginning the scope is less strategic, it's very operational, and it's a lot of work everywhere, but the type of work is very different. So, but I was thriving in that type of environment. So I moved across from manufacturing to research and development, back to manufacturing, then to commercial roles. And I've been thriving in these type of more operations-like roles. And that.
But I guess there's, psychology as a background is a pretty good background. I mean, we're Dale Carnegie, right? So we're teaching human relations skills, communication, which is based around psychology of how to deal with people and get on. So I'm sure that having had that background, perhaps your sensitivity, communication with people, ability to get people to come with you, has probably been a plus factor, because a lot of people who are, I'll say, technical people are often very good on the numbers, not so great on the communication. Very good on the numbers, but not so good on the people part. And yet they become leaders through, they're there. But I'm thinking that even though you didn't use your psychology specifically, directly, I'm sure there were elements that helped you to bounce around between these different areas to help you move up.
Fully agree. I think to be a great leader, you need to master both sides. And I think people sometimes get surprised about my background from the perspective of, okay, they expect people to be stronger on the numbers side, but actually most of any leader's job is change management. It's about understanding how can you set a vision that will make people buy into it, and how can you orchestrate a strategy process whereby the vision is translated into tactics that people will also take ownership of, and how can you orchestrate the organization so it becomes the most effective organization to actually execute to the strategy and win in the market, and that's side calls for a lot of psychology, I think. So I'm using what I learned in my studies every day, along, of course, with the whole financial side, all the numbers side of business, which is also extremely important. But I think in most leadership roles, you get exposed to that side very quickly. It is so important. Everybody understands that, so you learn it because you have to. Whereas the other side is maybe being paid less attention to, and then, as you say, there are some people who become good at it despite no matter what their background is, and those are typically the ones.
Well, even with an MBA, when you lay out an MBA, and you're doing a semester on this subject and a semester on that subject, it's a broad coverage, but a thin coverage in a way. You're not going deep, like you've done a whole psychology degree. That's going pretty deep on the people component, isn't it? So you've been with the company your whole career. Yeah. So how was it that you got yourself to Japan? Where did you come from to get to here?
Yeah, so my previous position was as general manager for our home market in Denmark and Iceland. This was a fantastic opportunity to get close to the patients that we are serving, the external communities, all our key opinion leaders, policymakers in government, etc. And I was then being approached in terms of what a larger geography could be that I could be interested in taking charge of, and Japan came up as one of the options, and that was really something that I then actively sought out.
So why is that?
Yeah. From a personal perspective, I've always been fascinated by Japan, by the culture. I really wanted to come here. I have been traveling to Japan in the past, also when I was in manufacturing. Japan stands out because it's the birthplace of lean, with the whole Toyota manufacturing system. And family-wise, I have a wife and 3 children. My wife was also always very fascinated with Japan and wanted to come here. So in terms of culture, this was really something dragging on us. And in terms of the business opportunities, I also found it very interesting because Japan is a strategic market for Novo Nordisk. It has been so historically. It has been extremely important back in the 80s. It was actually the key market that we internationalized our company into. Then the US took over after some years, but it was really funded through how we did business in Japan. And then, similar to many other pharmaceutical businesses, it has been a tough market over the past decades with the type of pricing reforms that has happened. But there are many opportunities still with a super aging society. Our company is looking into chronic disease. How can we prevent chronic disease and treat it more effectively so people can achieve healthy longevity? And from that perspective, there was a lot of interesting aspects for Japan. If we can succeed treating chronic disease in more effective ways here in Japan, that could lead the way for the rest of developed economies who are all facing the same aging population, a macroeconomically very challenging environment of a declining population in the working age due to the declining birth rates, and at the same time a larger and larger proportion of the population being above retirement age. It's close to 30% now in Japan. And so imagine if we can help create healthy longevity and make the population more productive from an economic standpoint at the same time as quality of life increases.
I mean, Japanese want to work longer too. They the sort of typical Aussie concept of 65, retire, that's it. I mean, that era has pretty much moved on. But Japan's never had that. Oh, I get to a certain age and I quit. They maybe have to leave that particular company, but they want to keep on working, so they want to be healthy. They want to have a long working life and keep going. And I think, as I recall, the second Abe cabinet made some really big inroads into speeding up drug approvals. Because I remember Japan always had a tremendously bad reputation for taking forever to get drugs approved and the testing, and didn't matter where you tested in the world, it had to be tested in Japan on Japanese, otherwise they wouldn't accept it, and slow and ponderous and lots of red tape and difficult. But I remember I was at some function that Abe was talking at, and he was talking about the time reduction where they'd managed to get some of these, not every approval, but a lot of approvals down. It was like a dramatic change. A really big change.
And that has worked. I mean, so it is now possible to get quite fast approvals in Japan, and we are also having launches where we are almost simultaneously launching into Japan at the same time as Europe, which is typically coming right after the US. So, and there are further regulatory reforms. Lately, there was previous requirement for having to do Japan-specific phase 1 trials, which is very costly, especially for smaller companies to do, which means that they are often not launching into Japan. That has been abandoned. So those type of reforms are working. I think what is more challenging is in the overall way in which the pricing structure works, how price cuts are being mandated from the government. There is a tendency to penalize innovation, so there's little incentive for innovation to really thrive in Japan, and the government is very focused on ensuring a much more thriving drug discovery ecosystem. But that requires that the market conditions are also becoming more attractive. And I think that's where, in terms of policy shaping, there's a need for more focus.
Well, as you said before, declining population, youth population declining, aging, retiring population going up. So the government is looking, where's the money coming from? Taxes going down here because we're losing people. Older people living longer, costs are going up on the medical side, so they've got a few contradictions there. But in terms of, you've had good experience in Europe, particularly, Denmark, France, etc., working, and you've lived and educated in England and Switzerland, I guess. I suppose.
Also lived in the US for
a year. In the US as well? Okay, right.
Yeah.
So you've had a good broad spectrum. So when you come here, what were some of the things that you sort of noticed were things you were a little bit different, or things you were pleasantly surprised, or things you thought, well, that's a bit of a challenge, or why are we doing it that way? What were sort of the differences you noticed between your previous leadership experiences and then what's required to lead here?
Yeah. So I think, as I mentioned, I was 5 years in France, and I think that was culturally a very good experience for me to have, as opposed to transitioning directly from only a Danish-based cultural leadership experience to Japan. I think what pleasantly surprised me was that Japan is actually less hierarchical than corporate culture in France, to my surprise.
Really? That's interesting. I never would have
because
thought
I would have thought that, Japan would be the most hierarchical company. It's more patriarchal. But I learned about this concept of middle up down rather than top down, that there is an expectation that middle management layers are kind of involved in shaping the direction, of course, based on some overall direction setting from the president. And I think that way of shaping strategy and driving change is actually a very nice middle road between kind of a Danish, very, very egalitarian, flat structure where everybody feels that they should own the strategy because they have a good opinion about it, to a much more hierarchical where it needs to come top down. There's not a lot of co-creation, but then when you are announcing it top down, there's also a lot of resistance. That's what I experienced in France, which made change management completely different. So I think this middle up down was a surprise to me, but a pleasant one. But what I have found difficult then to manage, and where I've taken a lot of learning points, is this concept of nemawashi, of how you need to really carefully drive processes of bilateral consensus shaping until you have that meeting at the end where everybody is sitting around the table, and then you decide on something. The good thing about that is, of course, that at that time everybody is aligned and execution becomes flawless. So that's another positive surprise in Japan. But the very creative, innovative process of just getting very different minds around a table and creating out-of-the-box solutions is then more difficult in this environment, and that I'm still struggling to find the formula for creating in an environment where we need to innovate.
That's a good point. You think about a typical Western mindset is, well, if I meet the president of the company and I convince the president, then the president will drive the decision down. They're going to buy my product or service, whatever it is. But as you say, the divisions have a lot of power in Japanese companies, and the division heads have a lot of power. And often the nemawashi is someone at the bottom is tasked in a particular division to coordinate across divisions and start doing due diligence across divisions, and gradually, get it to the sort of assistant section head, then section head, then gradually it bubbles up. And then at some point in time, it gets the stamp of approval from everybody, and away we go. But as you say, it doesn't have that sort of rigor, typical Western rigor of debate, of out-of-box thinking, throwing ideas around, testing ideas in the room, which we would do that. We'd call everyone together. We'd have no decision in mind, but we'd get the details out, then we have a discussion, share, argue, debate, agree, and then get on to the next thing, right? So that maybe the execution goes quickly, maybe it doesn't go so quickly, maybe it goes smoothly, maybe it doesn't go so smoothly.
Usually not.
Usually not, right? So, but it is a different way of doing things, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. So, and I think, there are positives and negatives about both of them, as mentioned. I'm very positively surprised to see how strong the execution power is, and the strong commitment also, but also the alignment about how to execute in a way which is, from a resource spending perspective, much more efficient. So assuming that you come up with the right solutions, it is a more effective model, or at least efficient model here in Japan compared to what I've used to in the past. But in terms of creating innovative solutions, it's less effective.
So I think that silo problem is one of the issues, isn't it? And also the other thing too, I don't know about Novo Nordisk, but I meet a lot of CEOs in this process of doing these interviews, and I ask them, do you have an ideation method? Do you have a brainstorming system? And I would say 98% of people say, no, we don't have one. Now, what you're talking about is if you can get the people at the bottom to start ideating and having across, silo boundary discussions and getting some real true brainstorming going at that level, the process can still continue on its way up, but it's going to bring in that innovative aspect that you're talking about, rather than just being very due diligence, sort of systematic, but not necessarily innovation aspect to it. So that might be something that companies need to think about. But
I think those the divisional kind of silos where people want to be respectful for what has been guided from above them in the silo, which is preventing some of that. I think another aspect is also the risk aversion, or the the risk of failure if you're putting something out which is a bit out of the box, and how will it be received, and if it's being well received and we are starting to execute on it, but it turns out that it was not the best idea, will I then be blamed for it? So I think there's also a big piece around how you build psychological safety and trust, and how you incentivize so people understand that what they're being rewarded for is their entrepreneurship to the same extent as the business results themselves, so that people feel incentivized also in the formal systems to actually innovate, even when it sometimes leads to lack of success or even failures.
How would you contrast how that process is dealt with in Denmark, say, for example, in Japan? So someone comes up with an idea, they manage to sell people on the idea, it starts rolling, and then actually we realize, for whatever reason, it's a disaster, or it's not going to work, or we've blown a lot of money on it. In Japan, people are hesitant to put their hand up and attach their name to something like that, because if it goes off the rails, they feel it's a career ender.
Yeah. Yes.
But how about in the case of someone in Denmark, for example, if they're the sponsor and it is a disaster for whatever reason, what happens to them in their career? Do they just, brush the wounds off, the dust off, and get back up and fight another day? Or does it impact their career progression? That people should be fearful there too? Or this is just Japan? People are fearful about career progression if things don't go well?
Yeah, no, so I think one important aspect is also that human beings are human beings, and I see more similarities than differences across cultures. Of course, in Denmark, people are also afraid of failures. They're also hesitant to be exposed if there's too much risk associated with it, etc. But the similarities aside, I think there is an understanding to a higher degree in Denmark that what you are being rewarded for, and what senior leaders look for when they look for potential with people, is more their approach. Everybody understands that we cannot have the right idea all the time. Nobody can. Everybody understands that you need to go through some failures. I think there's more of a leadership philosophy maybe in Denmark that actually you want to hire people who have been through difficult times, because that's where they learn. And I know from myself also that I have learned most in times during my career where I was really failing, and having hard problems. And for that reason, I'm also curious every time I have a candidate in front of me to explore what the person has learned from past failures. And the persons who demonstrate an ability to reflect on their learning is a better placed candidate than one who can just show green KPIs along the way. That's actually an area of concern to me, because I doubt that they're really set up to face hard challenges in the future if they have only experienced successes. So I think that there's a bit more an understanding that actually it's more the approach you're having, the mindset that defines the career opportunities that you have, rather than per se having ticked the box on all the KPIs that you were receiving on an annual basis in the past.
Which is exactly the Japan model, isn't it? Safe and sure, do everything perfectly well, do what you're told, quickly, whatever.
But what surprises me in that is actually when you are really learning lean philosophy, which I learned from Toyota when I was visiting back in the manufacturing days, is that when you should be most concerned when you're looking at a daily performance board which is all in green. You should value being in red. You should value being behind, because that's where you can do problem solving, to learn, to improve your processes and become better all the time. And if you're setting yourself up for success in the sense that you're setting the bar too low and you're always in green, you are hindering that learning, and you'll be outperformed by competition, because they will have more ambitious targets. So I would have imagined that philosophy would anchor itself with in the wider culture, but maybe it's not representative.
I don't see it. I mean, Toyota, I think, is a very special company in that sense in many ways, and so they have got a very different culture there. But for most companies, you know, particularly non-manufacturing companies, its solutions are, you know, service industry. No mistakes, you know, steady she goes. You know, where's my KPI boxes? I've got to tick all those and move forward. What have you found has worked well so far in Japan, which you may have used in other countries when you were leading there as well, to get people engaged to follow you as the leader?
So first of all, and sorry for making all these references from Lean, but but I think since we are here at the birthplace, it's just a wonderful opportunity. I think of the organization as an inverted triangle where what we want to do is to create value for customers and those who are in the front line, whether it's on a manufacturing line or whether it's in the commercial front line, convincing customers of the value of what we are providing, are the ones at the top of the organization, and all supporting functions and leadership levels should try to remove all the stones from the road to success for this front line and create the best framework for them to thrive and succeed. So I think it's extremely important in leadership to be very curious about what are the problems faced by the front line and what are they dreaming of. And often it is about creating satisfied customers and some of the deeper purposes of the organization. In our industry, it's about creating healthy longevity for the population. So I think our front line is very purpose-driven, and they are very focused on, okay, are we really making a difference for patients? And are we leaving our direct customers, which are typically the physicians, happy with what the medical education we're providing and the differentiated products that we can provide to them so they can provide better treatment to patients? And I think if we are succeeding crafting strategies that are addressing that purpose and addressing any problems that they are facing to live up to that purpose, my experience is that then that brings people on board. You know, whatever you need to succeed with on a tactical level, also in the short to medium term. So having a purpose-driven strategy that caters for what the front line needs, and then working with all the middle layers on how we can provide the best framework conditions for that to play out, I think is very important.
If you want to be successful as a leader, do the Leadership Training for Managers course. All companies need people who can both manage and lead. Leading people screams out for real skills in communication, dealing with all different types of people, being excellent at innovation, planning, delegation, handling mistakes, doing performance reviews really well, and inspiring and motivating the team. Do the Leadership Training for Managers course now in either Japanese or English. Leading is easy. Getting people to follow is the hard part. That is a great quote from Yogi Berra. Surprisingly, despite the complexities of leading here in Japan, everyone has to work it out by themselves. Foreign leaders want practical, applicable, expert advice. This is now available for the first time in history. Grab your copy of Japan Leadership Mastery on Amazon today and avoid the mystery, trial and error, especially the errors. What have you found has worked well to tap in and understand what those people on the front line actually need? Because, you know, you're the president, you've got direct reports, it's a big organization, there's a lot happening. Time is limited. So, you know, spending time with people sounds great in theory, but in practice, you know, you look at your schedule, there's no time for anything. So you find you ripping, like I'd go to companies, I'm not going to name the names, but people are running around with their oyster shell laptops half open because they've got to go to sleep, going literally from one meeting room to the next meeting room just all day, you know, and you wonder, how do you get any work done when your life is like that? I mean, that is work, I know, but actually, what are you producing? And how are you having time to spend time with your people? So what have you found works well to actually be able to tap into that frontline group and find out what things are important to them and which pebbles and stones to move out of the way for them?
I'm continuously trying to update practices to get exposed as much as possible to that. I think what existed when I arrived, which I've taken over and which works very well, is I'm going on customer meetings frequently. That's set in the schedule, and I think every time I have time to have a lunch with the front line, you know, between some of those customer meetings where we can also have a bit of an informal chat, is a fantastic source of information from the front line. Then I've tried to have in larger kind of town hall meetings the opportunity for a lot of Q&A. I found it difficult there, based on the same dynamics we talked about before, about speaking up or lack of speaking up, to have people really voice their opinion. So over time it has developed into smaller, we call them listening sessions or road shows, where we're going to smaller groups in the front line, and I have that scheduled every year. I have several days kind of where I go to different regions, meeting with a smaller group of people, and we have a specific setup of us presenting a bit of what is the state of the nation and where we're headed, but then having lunch together and inviting for dialogue. And my experience is every time it's not a formalized Q&A session, but it's an informal chat, that's where you're hearing a lot of things, and I get a lot of value from that. So
yes, I can imagine that would work. In fact, you know, one of the worst questions you can ask of a Japanese audience is, what do you think? I mean, people just freeze when they, oh my God, I'm going to express my opinion, I'll be judged. People think I'm stupid, I'll upset people with my opinion. Better to say nothing. Whereas we found, especially in training, you know, we ask people not to think about what you think, but to, what are your ideas? Write down your ideas. So they've got time. They've got time to write them down. And everyone's had time to write something, so there's no excuse for not writing something down. So there's no escape route, right? And then having written it down, we don't say, well, what did you think about that? We ask them very simply, what did you write down? And just that change of phrasing
that's a great one.
From what you think to what you wrote down, they very happily tell you what they wrote down. Ask them what they think, not so keen to share it. So it's amazing, just that small
That's angle. A great detail. I'll pick that up and bring that in. What we're doing in the roadshows are often also to allow people to then express what they have reflected individually to the person sitting next to them, and then we take it into a larger group, and then at the end, because they're hearing similar things from peers, then they are much more comfortable also speaking up in larger forums, and I think that works as well.
Yeah, it does work here. We talked before about lean, and we talked about, you know, innovation. Have you found any particular methodologies or ways of getting bottom-up ideas? Because you said before, it's a sort of middle down and then back up, isn't it? So, but is there any way of you found to streamline that or speed it up or energize it to get ideas coming from below? Because often in a lot of Japanese organizations, the middle level type of a buffer zone, really. They absorb ideas from above and information from above, but they're not so great in passing it down. And so the people at the bottom aren't really understanding what's going on in its entirety. So, you know, getting ideas from people at the coalface, that type of thing, or just creating ideas. Anything that's come along that you found has worked well?
Yeah, this is a big challenge, and I can definitely see some of the dynamic you're describing when I'm at customer visits with frontline people. I often get surprised by how little they understand the context of what we're doing. So it's a good opportunity to explain it. I think we have a strategy process in our company where we have identified ambassadors for the strategy who are then being involved together with a lot of the middle line managers in actually trying to translate what we're doing and provide more context, and then inviting for input from all the departments that they're representing for how we can succeed with whatever we want to succeed with in the strategy. I think it is still difficult to get to the speed that I have experienced in some other geographies in terms of just having people challenge, why don't we do something like this? There's a lot of filtering taking place. So I don't know if we have a formula for how to speed up the process, but at least when you are appointing some of these ambassadors for the strategy, that creates a more legitimate mandate for people to then express their opinions. That's something I can see has moved a bit in terms of speed.
Yeah, we've come up with a ideation formula.
Yeah.
Very, very simple. But it strips out gender bias, it strips out age bias, it strips out status bias, it strips out chronological bias of who joined the company before somebody else, which is a hierarchical posse, right? And it scoops up the introverts and the shy people who normally don't speak up, and so the usual three people who are the most, boisterous get all their ideas up on the wall, and everyone else sits there in silence. It takes all that out. So, yeah, that's something we found works very well in Japan, particularly to counter that problem. In terms of, if we think about trust, trust is important every country, no question about that. However, somehow, I can't even express it well enough, but somehow I always feel that in this country, trust is even more important. I know it's important everywhere, but somehow it's even more important here. So what have you found has worked well to build trust with the teams?
Yeah, so I fully agree that trust here is even more important. Denmark that I'm from, similar to the US and other places, is more transactional in the sense that as long as we can quickly see a common objective or a common goal, then we feel inclined very quickly to just share ideas openly on how we can achieve it together, and then we're good to go, kind of where here my experience is that it's much more requiring trustful relations to develop before you can go to that stage. So I only having been here 3 years, but of course still needing to deliver results, I've tried to shortcut a lot of processes to see how can we build trust faster. I have not found a better formula than spending time with people, and especially social time, recognizing that it does require going to dinners and having drinks together to really develop the relationship before you can start discussing business. Of course, I try to share our long-standing commitment to Japan. We are a long-term focused company, so when people understand that I'm not coming for some short-term gains, but I'm more invested in the long-term future of all the partners in the healthcare ecosystem. Hopefully that can accelerate the trust building. But yeah, if you have any models for that, please share.
Yeah. I think, we could take up a couple of hours on that here, no problem at all. I'll maybe talk to you about that separately in terms of building trust. But Japan is a high-touch culture, and so that personal, thing is always important. So they always want to meet each other, because then they know, having met each other, the communication goes smoother afterwards. And so one of the problems is when you're in Japan and your counterparty is overseas and you never get to meet them, maybe you see them online, but it's not the same thing. That for Japanese is quite challenging, quite challenging actually. Maybe not so much for the non-Japanese, Europeans particularly, I think it's probably get by, but it can be hard. In terms of thinking about culture, like there's going to be the global company culture, which is going to be driving things across the world the same way. And then we are in Japan, so you've got Japan culture.
Yeah.
So you as the leader, you can't ignore headquarter culture and go against that, you get fired. And you can't ignore Japan culture because you just find yourself bashing your head against the wall and it's not going anywhere. Yeah. It's not making any progress here. And then you've got Kasper culture, you know, how you think and what you like and how you think it should be done. So what have you found has worked well to build a culture in Japan?
So as I mentioned before, I think most employees in our company here in Japan are very purpose-driven. That aligns very well to my personal values. I'm very purpose-driven. That's also why I've been with our company for 23 years now, and I think taking a starting point in that has worked well. Also, when we are then trying to bridge to whatever agendas we have on the global company side. Which, by the way, is also a very overall purpose-driven organization. Then, when I arrived 3 years ago, I was given some small slips of paper from employees around the company. I think I received 150 small slips of paper because a question had been asked. Okay, there's this new guy coming in. What would be the advice that you would give to our new president?
This was done by your predecessor?
And, it was done. So we have some people coming in from our global headquarters every year to do what we call a facilitation, to see the extent to which we actually live our corporate values.
Oh.
And so these facilitators, they asked the question because their visit coincided with me coming in. And so back to your point before about when you ask people to put down something in writing, they would maybe be more inclined to express their honest opinion. One of the first slips I took up and read from this box was that Japan is not just one culture, it's many. And I think that was a great point that has stayed with me, that instead of, me coming in, making comparisons between Japanese culture and the Danish culture, or the French, UK, the US cultures, which are the ones I've been most exposed to. There are many different subcultures in Japan. Of course, there are some overarching national themes, but there are also companies in Japan that are extremely innovative, out-of-the-box thinking type communities. So how can I actually look for some of those subcultures within also our own company and fertilize those to grow faster and then more suppress the ones that we are not needing in the future and making the ones we need in the future grow, so it becomes less of a battle between us and them and more internally understanding what do we need more of and less of in the future.
That's true. I mean, Japan, typically the explanation is a mountainous country, and so people have over centuries have grown up in isolation from each other, and also the political control was that if you lived in a particular, we'd call it a prefecture today, but we call it a han in those days, you didn't leave, and perhaps you didn't even leave your own village. And so that isolation made quite different groups within Japan, and so here we are in the modern era, but they tend to, like Nagoya, I worked in Nagoya and I worked in Osaka, and totally different to Tokyo, and the people who were working in Nagoya predominantly graduated from school, either high school or university in Nagoya. And I come from Queensland, which is a very parochial place in Australia. Brisbane, a very parochial town. So I recognise it straight away. I was just like, it's very parochial here, And so it is that difference, isn't it? And in terms of thinking about other parts of the culture that maybe you bring to it from your experience, because at the end of the day, you run this place the way you want it to run, within the frameworks, but you still run it a certain way. What works for you to actually make sure that the culture you want to create actually gets created? What has worked for you to do that?
So I think when you look at what drives culture, of course, there's a lot that starts with the senior leadership team. I mean, because whether we like it or not, people also copy their leaders and very quickly it drives through. So I always look at whether the existing leadership team, the one I'm taking over as I'm coming in here, can represent the culture that I want to drive. And we have a lot of discussion. I invest a lot of time in my direct leadership team to make sure that we are aligned on what is the direction, and as part of that, what is the type of culture we want to drive, and how can we do it. And I'm often changing members of my team with that in mind, so that I'm setting a team which is really aligned to driving the culture the way we need. Then I think. So
just let me clarify that. When you say you're setting the team to align with the culture, etc., does that mean you are removing people who are not fitting in with the direction, or does that mean that you are placing people into different roles to help them grow, and then be a evangelist for whatever you're doing in a new section or something? What do you? Because there's a couple of ways I can interpret that.
Yeah.
There's both probably.
And I'm doing both. So basically, I believe in people and the potential of people to develop. So I always want to give people a strong chance at driving together with me the business that we are responsible for. But I'm also putting a lot of emphasis on the mindset and the behavior, not just the business results. I believe in teams, and teams can only thrive if we have a mindset of playing together. So for my direct team, I'm also setting behavioral targets. So we talked about how we can incentivize for innovation before, and in my direct team, people are incentivized for having an enterprise mindset, for playing each other stronger, and values like that. And when people subscribe to that, etc., and I can see we can have a full team, then I keep them in the team. If not, then we have a conversation about this is how we need to play now if we are to succeed together. And if not, then it's perfectly fine that people want to leave for other opportunities. And then we do that, because that's better than we have friction for the coming period. We cannot have that from the top team. But I'm also, of course, doing what you say in terms of looking at, okay, so with the different profiles, where can we both drive and accelerate business growth and individual growth by having stronger matches to potentials for by moving people around to different positions. I think we cultivate an enterprise mindset if we allow people to move across the value chain. So I'm often allowing for people to move outside their area of expertise for the sake of creating better solutions for the enterprise as a whole, and that will accelerate their careers in turn.
It's kind of interesting, isn't it? Because if you think about that, what do big Japanese corporates do? Every 3 years, they're moving someone out of a job. Like, you go from being the head of heavy machinery export, sales or something, now you're running HR. Or you're running the accounting department or something completely out of your comfort zone. In a way, it's sort of interesting. The Japanese traditional system has got that idea of delegation and moving people around to test them. And they do it, I guess, so they have a better understanding of the holistic aspect of the company, but it also takes you out of your comfort zone. What about if someone said, hey, Kasper, you've been running the organization in Japan for 3 years. You know about Japan now. I'm being sent to Japan to run my company's Japan operation. How can I be an effective leader in Japan? What advice would you give them?
So similar to many other countries, I would definitely advise getting to the front line, being curious, understanding what is important for people.
What does that mean, the front line, in that sense?
So that means not only getting your information from your direct reports, but getting access to the wider organization, not from the standpoint of undermining the leadership levels in between you and those, as I mentioned before, standing at the top of the pyramid, having to drive value for customers, but more to get access, direct access to what we really face when we are meeting our customers, and what are obstacles to driving value for our customers, and being very curious to understand. And I think where I would probably differ a bit in Japan compared to other countries is to be more patient in terms of crafting then the strategy based on that understanding, and having been listening with curiosity before coming in with a 90 days kind of plan for, okay, this is how we will win in Japan. I think this notion of the first 90 days, I have definitely relaxed a lot in Japan.
Did you have your 90-day plan?
I didn't have it, but it is a notion that exists in many organizations. And back to the expectation from headquarters is that often that after 90 days, then if you are good at execution, and if you really want to have the drive to move the needle, you need to kind of drive the plan. I think, of course, you should not be silent, but maybe there's a layered approach where after a couple of months you're clear on an overall direction, but all the discussions about how to get there would need more time through the layers in this middle up down type process.
I've always found that when I come into a new organization, I'll see things, I'll think, well, why are we doing that? It seems to be slow or wasteful or inefficient or something. And then I'll meet the client. And then I discover, that's why we're doing that, to keep that client happy. And the person in my team has been defending the action rigorously. Like, I'm trying to change the action. I think I'm improving it there and get rid of it. They're desperately hanging on to it and fighting back and not giving in. But when I meet the client, then I realize, because the Japanese are so client-oriented, they're the sort of ambassador for the client inside our company in a way. And so they're defending the client's interests, so they stay a client. And I'm the new boss, and I don't understand any of that, so I come in and start breaking things. But then after a while, you realize, talk to clients early is a pretty good rule.
I think that's fantastic, and of course that's also part of the process. I think this is very strongly anchored in the culture already. I think our frontline has a very good concept of what the clients or the customers really want, and you get it yourself when you go on these customer meetings. But I also challenge the organization to think about who are the future customers, so because there's a tendency that we know our existing customers very well, and if we have a business which is very stable and it's about the same customers in the long-term future, that will work fine. But often you'll be in a situation where you need to think about future business as well, and how can we become more clever about that and use that as a source of transformation and innovation as well.
I think generally speaking, most Western sales teams are built around hunters and new business. Because they're on commissions, and most Japanese sales teams are based around farmers and taking exceedingly good care and keeping existing customers year after year after year. So it's always a challenge in Japan to find salespeople who are hunters to go out there and be comfortable to find someone new, because there's a lot of resistance. And we teach sales training, so we notice in the role plays that a lot of supposedly experienced salespeople, they are clueless on the new client acquisition part of it. But farming, fantastic. But as you say, the opportunities have to keep coming. And farming is important. I'm not saying it's not important, but you've got to actually have new clients too. What about Japanese? Should the new incoming expat CEO learn Japanese?
Yes, Not so. I'm taking Japanese lessons. I don't think I'll be fluent any day soon, but I think the fact that I do it and make an attempt at it is already, when building relations, a fantastic door opener and a fantastic foundation on which you can build a relationship. So not from I have people in my team who have been here for 20 plus years and they still feel uncomfortable speaking Japanese. and so I understand how complex it is to learn Japanese fluently. But I think, rather quickly you get into the mode that you can do the informal exchanges of business cards in Japanese, etc., and that just accelerates the relation building so much. So I think.
Well, I think there's you studied in England and you worked outside of Denmark, and so I'm going to say something harsh about the English now, but the English attitude is you should speak English, and if you can't speak really good English, there's something wrong with you. Does that person speak another language? No, that's a very typical English attitude, right? So the expectation is that you should speak good English as a foreigner, but the Japanese expectation is almost zero that you're going to speak Japanese. It's changed since I first got here in '79, but it's still not a high expectation that you will be super fluent in Japanese. So if you can't say it perfectly, you don't have a big vocabulary. Japanese are quite forgiving, I think, because their expectation is super low, whereas the English are sort of the opposite. It's a bit more demanding in that sense, I guess.
Which is the same in France. French people also expect you to speak French, and they're also very judgmental on your pronunciation, which I suffered a lot from. But there it was not possible to work effectively without speaking the language. I fully agree with you. The culture here is much more forgiving, and there's not the expectation. But I do think that you get much faster into a trustful relation if you show that you're trying, because it shows commitment for the longer term. You're not signaling that you're on the way out the day after you arrive. So,
what about your definition of leadership? How would you define leadership?
So for me, leadership is about helping people to grow and succeed. So it's about managing to collect people around a shared purpose and mission and direction for the long term, and then helping them to succeed. I'm very focused on leadership not being something around a role or a mandate that you have.
Stripes on
the
uniform or something.
So I think when I look for great leaders, I look for people who are informally taking responsibility and managing to create a movement or gathering people around a shared direction. And I think being kind of humble about you not being the one to decide, but rather you being the one who has a responsibility for orchestrating that we succeed together, I find much more sympathetic. So that's I don't know where I'm faring on it, but at least that's something I'm striving for in myself, in my own leadership development journey.
Well, Kasper, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me, Greg.
Today. So please join us again for our next episode of Japan's top business interviews.